Today I'll be showing you some examples of common syntax errors in Mathematica. Errors like these make up most of the problems that students have with their assignments, and even experienced Mathematica users can make these mistakes once in a while. Example 1 here, I want to plot the function e to the x, but when I run the cell I get a blank graph. Obviously there's some sort of problem with my code, but how do I figure out what it is? My plot command looks fine, so maybe there's something wrong with my function. One of the easiest ways to test functions is to plug in values. So if I run f of 1, I should expect e to the 1 or e, which is what we get. But to make sure, we can use the n command to get a numerical answer. And what we want is 2.72, whatever the real value of e is, but instead we get just the letter e. So obviously there's something wrong still. It turns out that e needs to be typed in a special way for Mathematica to declare it as a function. So if I come down here and I type in e, I don't get the number that we would expect, I just get e. So instead I can try e to the 1, capital E, to the 1 point, and that'll give us the numerical answer of e, or we can use escape escape to get e, or we can get the special e through the palettes menu, hit basic math assistant, and then click e, and you get the real e. Now it's important to note that a lot of functions in Mathematica need to be capitalized, such as instead of pi, use pi, or escape pi escape, escape pi escape, and that gives you the symbol for pi, or you can use the palettes. Also, things like cosine need to be capitalized. You see it's black if it's the right function, and things like arctan should be arctan, and that's true for most functions in Mathematica. So if we come up here and we replace this e with a capital E, it should plot correctly, and there we have it. So that's example number 1. In example number 2 here, it's in the same vein as the first one. I'm trying to plot the sine of x, and when I plot it, I get a blank graph. So again, I'm going to test a point. Let's try g of 2 pi, and I get 2 pi sine, which is not sine of 2 pi, so it's obviously wrong. So what's wrong with my function? Well, I can see that if I'm not colorblind, then there's red parentheses after the sine function. It turns out for functions in Mathematica, you need to have brackets after them for them to work properly. And if I replace that with brackets, then I have the sine function as expected, and g of 2 pi should be 0 if you remember your unit circle. Example 3 here is a bit subtler. I'm trying to find the point where sine of t is equal to t squared. I set the search to be around 1, because if you think about it, the sine function can never be higher than 1. But when I run the cell, I get an error that says the function value is not a list of numbers with dimensions, whatever all this stuff means. It doesn't tell me much unless I really think about it. So again, trying to plot the function doesn't work, sine of t minus t squared. And even if I define the function to be sine of t minus t squared, then I can't plot it. So what's wrong here? Well, it lies in the use of variables. In my find root command, I'm asking Mathematica to find the point where sine of t equals t squared around the x value of 1. When using functions, you have to make sure that you use the same variables throughout. This problem is also in the other lines, where I try to plot the sine of t with respect to x. So if I replace the t in the find root function, then I get that the answer is 0.87, which, you know, that's the answer that I want. And if I replace x with t in my plot, then there's that. And if I plot h of t with respect to t, and I define it as h of t, then I should get the same plot. And there we go. That's how you fix it. This last example isn't necessarily syntax, but it's one of the most common and hardest to diagnose errors in Mathematica. So here I'm trying to plot the sine of y, and my code seems to be perfectly fine given all the things that we know so far. But when I plot it, I get this weird straight line, which is obviously not a sine function. I'm trying to look at what I did wrong, and I can't see anything. It looks completely fine. So why is the graph straight? Well, if you think about it, this straight line must mean that q of y is a constant. So let's try seeing if y has been previously defined. So if I come down here and I type in y, y is equal to 5. So that means that q of y is always equal to sine of 5, which is around -1 here, for all y, because y never changes. So no matter what I try to do, the plot will always be the same. So to get rid of this error, I can do a few things. I can change y and all of this to a variable that already isn't defined, like x, which, is a lot of retyping. But it works. At least it should. And there we go. That's the sine function that I want. Also, I can use the clear command. So I can clear y, and y is no longer 5. And that's fine. Or I can come to the evaluation window and hit quit kernel, if you can see that. Well, you can't see it, but at the bottom of the evaluation window, there's a quit kernel option, and you can do that. Quitting the kernel deletes all of the stored variables and functions that you have defined in the program's memory, so be careful in using it that you don't mess up your own work. So those are a few of the most common syntax errors we see in Mathematica. Thanks for watching.